Hello and welcome to Maximum Disc, a show where I celebrate physical media and talk about films that I own on Blu-ray and 4K Blu-ray. I'm James Adamson, I'm a co-host on the Double Reel Film Podcast. If you like this chat about physical media, please do check out Double Reel. It's a magazine-style podcast made by people who love films as much as you do. We think if you check out any of our episodes, you'll hear discussions on some great topics of different kinds and different films and come away with some good recommendations of something to watch instead of just scouring through whatever the algorithm is sending out to you. That's the sales pitch for the podcast. Now we're talking about physical media. Why does it matter? Well, short answer, if you care about a film, you need to own it. You can't rely on the streamers to make something available. You'd be surprised how often when you're looking for something specific, it's not there. And if it is, it's not there for long or it's not there tomorrow. It's not the version that really makes the film work, like the director's cut or the extended edition, and it's not going to look and sound its best on some compressed internet file compared to its proper version on a disc, on a shelf, ready for you to watch, to, show off your cinema system in all its glory. So hopefully you're on board with that already, and that's why you clicked on this video to watch. So basically, each episode I talk about one film that I own. Obviously, you want to know whether the video and the audio are up to scratch. Is it a good transfer and reproduction of the original film? Is it worth investing in? I, go into the background of the film and everything else, what it means to me. And at the end, I kind of wrap up and talk about whether it's an essential purchase, which is always just my opinion, but it might help you make your own mind up. So today we're talking about Le Samourai on Blu-ray. So this is a 1967 French-language neo-noir crime film, directed and co-written by the legendary Jean-Pierre Melville. He's associated with the French New Wave of the 50s and 60s, but in fact he preceded them. He's kind of more old school, but he was a major influence on the Nouvelle Vague filmmakers like Godard, Varda, Truffaut, etc. He pioneered a lot of things that they really valued, independent filmmaking outside of this very established and kind of old-fashioned French system, shooting on location. He had a stylish visual aesthetic that didn't rely heavily on dialogue, and all of that influenced the new generation. But what was unique to him was his use of kind of American noir thrillers and gangsters, and he really went for the laconic, sparse dialogue and tough, iconic characters who told the story with their actions and expressions more than long speeches. Other key films of his include Le Cercle Rouge, Bob le Flambeur, Un Flic, and Army of Shadows. Fun fact about Melville, his real surname was Grimbach, but he took the name Melville as his nom de guerre when he was in the French Resistance in World War II and kept it for his filmmaking career. And some of his experiences in the Resistance made their way into his film Army of Shadows, so really interesting guy. The star of the film, the titular Samourai, is Alain Delon. His big break came in a film called Plein Soleil in 1960, which was an early adaptation of The Talented Mr. Ripley. The same year, he was in an Italian film, Visconti's Rocco and His Brothers. He soon became one of the great stars of the 60s and 70s and an undisputed icon of French film, this incredibly beautiful Frenchman who just sums up that kind of style of the day. He was in various other Italian, French and international productions such as The Leopard. He made several other films for Melville and worked with pretty much every notable French director of the day. My first sight of him, I think, was in Airport 79, The Concorde, which not one of his best work. Also, Nathalie Delon is in the film, Alain's wife. Cathy Rosier is the jazz singer who witnesses the first killing. And the rest of the cast includes various French actors such as François Perrier, a comedian cast against type, Jean-Pierre Posier, Michel Beautron, who, if I'm honest, I hadn't heard of most of these actors outside of this film. The cinematography is by Henri Decaille, a Melville veteran going back to La Silence de la Mer in 1949. He also photographed Melville's iconic Le Cercle Rouge. He also worked with a number of important French directors such as Louis Malle, Francois Truffaut and Claude Chabrol, and later worked on international films like The Boys from Brazil. The sound team was led by Alex Pront and Robert Pourret. I only know them from this, but those are the leads. The score is by François de Roubaix, a pioneer of French electronic music. He makes interesting use of something that sounds like a church organ in this score. Very atmospheric music and quite innovative in the day. Like a lot of things that are innovative in 1967, it kind of seems just normal now, but it was a big deal back then for him to make the music the way he did for films. Quick summary of what the film's about. Delon is a hitman, the samurai of the title. He has that same quiet, stoic, but ruthless aspect as one of these classic lone samurai characters that you see in films and other fiction. There's a quote from the Book of Bushido about the lonely way of the samurai at the start of the film. I think he doesn't get referred to as a samurai by anybody in dialogue or anything else, so you have to rely on the name of the film and that initial quote and the way in which Delon conducts himself to see that connection. But he's solitary, seemingly unemotional. He has few relationships apart from Nathalie Delon's character as the escort that he spends time with and who gives him alibis when he needs one, when he's out committing murder. An attachment forms with Cassie Rodier's singer through the course of the film because she witnesses it but somehow takes a liking to him. He kills for money. There's no real explanation for this except this is what he is and what he does. He performs a job clinically and, to the highest possible standards. But when he goes to get paid for his latest job, his contact, who hired him to commit the assassination, tries to kill him. He escapes, but now the samurai, Delon, has to escape the police who suspect him and find out why the person who called the hit wants him dead. And a tough, laconic, atmospheric, Paris set, neo-noir crime thriller ensues. This film was a huge influence on sort of that assassin hitman subgenre. You'll have seen a few of those, and on crime films in general. I mean, in particular, things like Ghost Dog Way of the Samurai with Forrest Whitaker, Walter Hill's The Driver, The American with George Clooney, Michael Mann's Thief, John Woo's The Killer, Leon and Nikita from Besson, and Ronin, the De Niro sort of action vehicle from the 90s. All those films and more besides take something from Melville's film. In particular, the way you can be iconic and tough without words and have that kind of wordless action. So very, very important film in that sense. Whenever you say the word important, it feels like you're weighing down on the film. It's also a good film in its own right, but it's a very influential film, and a lot of filmmakers and films that you will love, even if you haven't seen this film yourself. So my background with the film is that I actually came to it a bit later in life. I think that the French New Wave was a bit before my time. I didn't really catch those films growing up. I caught the films made by people who'd studied the New Wave. All of those guys from the 70s that everyone my age, all the film bros my age came to love, your Coppola, your Scorsese, people like that. They all learnt from the New Wave, and the New Wave learnt from Melville. So he's in the water, he's in the DNA. But I hadn't seen his films myself. Then over time, I became a fan of hitman films. There's something about that kind of amoral character and the perverseness of them having a code, even though that's what they do for a living. So I like those kinds of films. And like anyone, when you look for more of those films and read about them and start to become aware of the inspirations for like new Hollywood and Tarantino films that I love, I eventually got back to the Nouvelle Vague filmmakers and eventually back to Melville. I loved this film when I watched it, so I bought it. I can't get enough of it. It's so iconic. It's a very rewatchable film for me anyway. And although Melville is a bit more old school than the actual New Wave, he does epitomise that iconic 60s French film style. 60s Paris seems so cool. Delon and Nathalie Delon and Cathy Rosier are luminous on screen. That tough, laconic noir vibe, it's perfect for me. I absolutely love this film. All these kind of stretches with no dialogue, but brilliant sound and music and hats and coats that just everything just looks amazing about this film. I just take pleasure in being in this kind of neo-noir world. And any modern attempt to be a neo-noir world has to kind of bend the knee to Melville, before they proceed, in my humble opinion. So I loved this film, and it was inevitable I would want to buy my own copy, and that's what's happened. So let's talk about the disc. It's a Criterion Blu Ray, UK version. They've done other region versions like Region 1 as well, but mine is specifically for the UK. Now, obviously, Criterion is one of the top-end companies. They can always be relied upon for a quality product and packaging, nice extras and all of that. If I have a gripe, it's that the menus on the disc do annoy me a little bit. I know it's their classic look and it's very stylish and everything, but it does seem to be more about form and less about function, in my humble opinion. And for example, you can't really tell you've turned subtitles or audio options on or off except by trial and error. I'm going to sound like a grouchy old man saying that. I do apologise. But yeah, my advice when you're buying any Criterion disc is try and get used to the menus. Otherwise, you're sitting there going, this 5.1 sound isn't very good. What's going on? And you're actually on some old stereo version that you didn't kind of realise that you'd selected. But that minor gripe aside, obviously it's a very, very nice Criterion disc. This is I think it was done in 2021. It's a digital HD restoration of the film. They didn't do an HD, a 4K transfer at the time, but it's a very, very, very careful transfer to HD that they did for this film based on original negative and everything. Like all Criterion discs, it has a lovely illustrated booklet with an essay inside by film historian David Thompson in this case. It also has the transcript of an interview with Melville himself, which is great to read. There's some great stuff in there. It's a single disc, but it does have a reasonable amount of additional extras on there. It's got a 2005 interview with the editor of Melville on Melville, which was a documentary about him and his filmmaking, so you get some insights from that. There are archived interviews from Melville, Alain Delon and the cast about this film, and there's a featurette that you can watch exploring the friendship between Melville and Delon. So reasonable amount of stuff there. It's not lavish, but I think it's very, very good. And frankly, nothing about this film should be lavish. It's a little bit more austere than that. And I often say the word austere when I'm talking about my reviews and my taste in films. That's kind of an odd thing to say. But, it's pretty stripped down, but you get a lot for your money, I would say. I would note that there is now a 4K version of this disc, which this isn't. I'll mention a couple of things to do with the 4K disc later, but when I was shopping for a copy of this film, that didn't exist, and I decided to buy what was there. Wasn't sure if there'd ever be a 4K of this. Sometimes your older French films don't get one. I'll be thinking over time whether to upgrade to 4K from this. I'll mention a little bit about that at the end. But just bear in mind, I'm talking about the Blu-ray. There is a 4K to consider as well. So let's talk about the quality of the video. A little bit of technical information. It was shot on 35mm Eastman film with spherical lenses, which is not uncommon. It was remastered and restored by Criterion, as I mentioned, from an original negative, so it's quality work. They ignored a more recent remaster by Pathé and did their own work, and my reading suggested that the Pathé version wasn't very well received. So if you do have an old Blu-ray of this should be an improvement on that. They didn't create a 4K remaster, which is a little bit unusual considering they were doing this in 2021 and the tools to do that existed, and someone's since done that, but they didn't do that then for whatever reason. In terms of this film, it's a very good clear picture. It reproduces the original image very naturally. You get great detail, close-up of someone looking at their watch and the hairs on their arms. Delon looks beautiful and natural, and so do all the other actors. You still got the original lighting and colour schemes, which apart from a few sort of shots in nightclubs and stuff, it's very muted. The sun doesn't really shine. The city is mostly a greyish background. The police precinct is all kind of plain furnishings and unflattering light, because that's what a police station would look like. It's about being very realistic, but you do get Paris in all its glory. You do get the actors in all its glory, and it's a very, very good reproduction of that time without being sort of full of wild, exciting colours. It's not Valerian in the City of a Thousand Planets or whatever it is. It's the colours of the streets and environments that Melville was filming. Both of the Delons and Cathy Rosier look absolutely exceptional in this film. Once again, a true artist knows how to make these film stars look like gods of Olympus or something. They look absolutely incredible. Delon wears an amazing range of costumes. They're mostly hats and overcoats, but he just looks so stylish, and it looks amazing. I think it's mostly the fact that the film looks amazing in a certain style, and the film is a faithful reproduction of that. Obviously, it would be an absolute sacrilege and vandalism to stick all the DNR tools all over this. You need to stick to the original quality of picture, which they've done. And like I say, 35mm Eastman celluloid is good quality. There's no reason to do anything other than what they've done, which is a good, solid HD master. All of which waffle is a case of saying this film looks as good as the original film did, which should be good enough for anyone. In terms of the sound, the original sound mix was mono, and the disc reproduces that. No one's gone for like a 5.1 or an Atmos or anything. I've not really done a lot of research into the 4K yet. I don't know if they've done a new sound mix, but this is one of the situations where they've said, we're not going to mess around. We are going to reproduce the original sound, which was very carefully created by Melville and his team, and they're putting that out there. So the sound is not designed to blow the doors off, but it's shot on location. in Paris in the 1960s, and it brings all of that to life. There's a lot of street sound, there's cars, there's gunshots, there's music, and it needs to make you feel like you're there, and it does. It's clearly not as immersive as like an Atmos mix or 5.1, but it's very high quality, and if you've got good speakers situated all around your room, you will get a nice feeling of being in Paris, walking alongside Alain Delon in those mean streets of 1967 in the banlieue, which is great. The score is also great. I'll say it's really innovative, but it's also trying to, be neo-noir and reflect some classic sort of style. So while it's not kind of lots of soft kind of, hi-hat cymbals and double bass or some kind of, 40s noir style, it is very much its own thing, but it creates this timeless world, especially that church organ type sound, which often you hear more than you hear Alain Delon's voice in this movie, and it's very nicely done. Again, quality sound, but it's the original mono sound. They haven't done anything fancy to it, which in some cases is better. We talked about Excalibur earlier on this series, and John Boorman was really unhappy with the mix that when people attempted something a bit fancier than that. A good old-fashioned reproduction of the original sound is sometimes the right thing to do. And in this case, I would say it is. You hear some of that classic French jazz music in the nightclub, you hear people running down the street, you get all the sounds and, what dialogue there is, beautifully reproduced. Once again, like the video, I think it sounds as good as the original. And like I say, that is good enough, more than good enough. So overall, this film is just an absolutely classic of its kind. Now, not everybody likes Hitman films. I sometimes record the podcast with my son, who doesn't like Hitman films in the same way he doesn't really like con-man films, because he's like, well, why should I sympathise with someone who commits terrible crimes? And that's totally understandable. But for those of you who like, gangster films or assassin, Hitman films of any of that kind, there is something about that kind of imaginary world, basically, where you can somehow sympathise with an amoral character like that and be let into this world. The samurai code thing, it probably glamorises the character a little bit. That's also explored in an interesting way in Ghost Dog Way of the Samurai with Forrest Whitaker, that idea of this lone assassin with a code who is doing the bidding of a master of some kind, but somehow retains their own moral or personal centre of some kind. They're always an interesting character to watch, in my opinion, and this is probably the best. If I was going to say what's the best Hitman film of all time, you would throw the usual names out. This is really, really, really good, and it's beautifully made. Melville's vibe is so amazing. That 60s laconic noir tough style. Alain Delon is a beautiful, beautiful man. Everyone in this film just looks incredible. So I would say that if you like noirish crime thrillers of any kind, get over any challenges you might have with French dialogue and subtitles, because you don't want to miss out on this film. It's an absolutely brilliant movie, one of the best of all time of its kind. And especially if you like sort of French cinema and you like the Nouvelle Vague, this is where it all came from. Although this comes out after things like Abu de Souffle and A Bande à Part and all of those things, it's still just a genius film that just really sums up what that whole era was, and it revolutionised film. None of the movies that we watch, Coppola's The Conversation, all of these films about sound, and all of these films of the 70s when these film school people sort of went to the well and found the great filmmaking techniques. A lot of this is in the DNA of other great films that you love. So I'm rambling on, but Melville's Le Samourai is great. And then watch the rest of his films as well, because he's a great filmmaker. Is it an essential purchase? The only doubt over this is sort of which version you buy, because a physical media copy of this film is absolutely essential. Like I said, it's one of the all-time great crime films, especially of that sort of iconic French era. However, if you don't own a copy already, you do have a choice to make. Apparently, if you own that old Pathé copy, you definitely need to upgrade. You can get the Criterion Blu Ray that I've been talking about on this episode for somewhere over £20 if you shop around, okay, and whatever the equivalent is in your territory if you're not in the UK. But now there is a 4K Blu-ray version from Criterion for £29.99. That's not a lot more money. And from what I've read, it's a very good disc and somewhat of an upgrade from the standard Blu-ray. So from scratch, you might want to get that instead. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's 4K, right? So obviously it's 4K, and it's Criterion again, and they don't do bad transfers, okay? That wasn't around when I bought my copy, and you always have that uncertainty around when you buy films on Blu-ray, thinking, oh, this won't get an upgrade, will it? They don't do old French films, they only do, modern stuff. My mistake, a few years later, out comes the 4K Blu-ray. This disc, however, is excellent. You won't be disappointed if you buy it. Reviews don't suggest the 4K exactly blows this out of the water, so I don't think I'll be upgrading anytime soon. Maybe I will, win the lottery tonight and, buy everything I own of 4K Blu-ray, and turn one of my bedrooms into something that looks like a video store. Sure, but in the real world, you can't own everything. There's films I don't own at all to look for ahead of that. If you don't own it at all, you must buy it. I know I said you've got to make your own mind up. Don't make your own mind up. Take it from me. Buy a physical media copy of this film. But you might want to go for the 4K ahead of it. But if you do go for this disc, you will get an excellent film for your shelf. So that's Le Samourai. Thank you for joining me to talk about it. I really enjoyed reviewing it and sharing my thoughts with you. I hope you found this useful. More films like this will be on the way. I hope you enjoy those. I hope you enjoy the other episodes of Maximum Disc that we have. If you like our chat about physical media, please do check out Double Reel, the podcast. Ways to find us and the podcast and our socials will be on the screen in a moment. But in any event, I hope to see you here for more physical media chat sometime soon, right here on Maximum Disc. The Maximum Disc YouTube channel is brought to you by Double Reel, the monthly magazine podcast for the discerning film nerd. If you like our celebration of physical media, please check out the podcast for more chat about the films we love and hate.